there's different types of kind of what they're being used to do, where that seems to be more challenging. I'll just tell you on a kind of a personal level, I personally find these boards and commissions where there's a specific ward appointment, I really actually dislike it. It's not because I don't find it important to identify a connected person from the 8th Ward to be part of that work, but I will tell you we get almost no feedback on kind of the broader context of the board or commission, and no push either from staff, because of course it's really challenging for a staff member to challenge a council member. Why don't you do a little more outreach because you didn't get a very good range of applicants, or whatever it is, to kind of give us that feedback on how are we thinking of how to build that board or commission as a whole and have it work together as a whole, including these goals around diversity and what they look like, when we just get that feedback on that one appointment. So I don't know if that's just my personal experience, and maybe in the end it all kind of works out, and that's, you know, just getting too excited about it. But I'll tell you, it feels like those are sometimes missed opportunities for us to kind of understand better where might we be looking for talent in different places, or we might need to do things to reopen application process just to make sure we have competition in terms of great applicants to continue to get them excited about these boards and commissions. So just a little bit of feedback.
Sure. Chair Gordon, Council Vice President Glidden, I would like to address your first comment. I will say that the City Clerk's office gathers board staff every couple months just to talk about, you know, things that are important to being a staff person for the board or commission, and training around unconscious bias and being more equitable as a staff person is something that that board staff are interested in and want. And for your second point, I think that's a very interesting idea and something that we can look into.
Yeah, it made me curious about CLIC, the diversity on CLIC, which is totally 100% solely 2 appointments per council office, and I'm sure we're not even thinking about it with what's the makeup of CLIC when we're going into that. And so it would be very interesting to find out what little diversity there is there. I could be wrong. Councilmember Fry also has a comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilmember Glidden. In the 3rd Ward, I think there are many spots that I think are highly competitive, whereas there's others where that I actually have to do a whole bunch of outreach just to get a single person to apply. So what that tells me is maybe we would lend to the overarching, city goals in some areas, but in others, well, we're just kind of selecting people by default. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Appreciate that. I do have a staff direction I wanted to make about this. And first of all, I want to say that I'm assuming that all the recommendations are things that the department is pursuing on their own, so that they're not included. And I have this written down if you want to take one and pass them down. One of them is for the next item. But this is something that caught my eye when it has specifically to do with age and 18 to 24-year-olds, which are called out. In fact, it says on page 7 of the plan, still falls short in the age category 18 to 24. And then if you look on page 8, you can see in 2014, it looked like maybe there was 1 person 18 to 24, and there's maybe 2 in 2016. And I know that there are some cities that explore with setting aside a seat. I think there's a lot of reasons why this might make sense. Partly also, I think an 18 to 24-year-old will be a way to maybe get at more renters, not necessarily, but it's also a way to get people involved civically when they're a little bit younger. The staff direction, I think I actually wrote it in such a way that it just says under 25, because I don't see why if a 17-year-old wanted a seat on a board, they shouldn't. And it's not the staff direction, I'll read it so you can be clear. It's just asking for some research to come back with some recommendations. So staff direction is directing neighborhood and community relations staff to work with the city clerk's office, the neighborhood and community engagement commission, and the 18 advisory boards and commissions surveyed as part of the 2016 diversity survey to develop recommendations for setting aside a seat on these boards and commissions for persons under 25. And maybe it's not going to be realistic on all of them. I don't know what the recommendations getting back we might have. I'll also note that this is a topic that came up. Committee members and a lot of people here know that we hosted a convening of the boards and commissions that report to this committee. We'll have a report on that in January. But one of the things that actually came up was some of the committees were saying, we'd like to set, at least there was one, set aside a seat so we could have a youth representative because it would be so useful. And sometimes I think it's hard to do that unless we take some extraordinary measures. So I'm going to move that staff direction. See if there's any discussion on that. Seeing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then if there aren't any other comments, I just want to make sure Peggy set this up so that we can vote on receiving and filing this one first, and then we'll go on to 9.2. Yeah, let's approve receiving and filing this report. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, thank you very much. It's wonderful having you present to our committee. Now we'll move on to 9.2. This is a diversity report on the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey. And Mr. Fine will be reporting to us on this. We haven't been doing this as long as we've been doing the boards and commissions. I think this might just be our second diversity survey for the neighborhood organization.
Yep. Can I get the PowerPoint?
Okay, welcome.
Set
Yeah.
up here. Good. All right, good afternoon, Chair Gordon and committee members. My name is Araya Fine. I'm a neighborhood support specialist at the Neighborhood Community Relations Department. I'm presenting the results of the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey Report, and this is a receive and file item. One note before we get started, page 13 of the report, the printed report, which you should have as well, and submitted, was corrected to remove skipped responses just to properly compare it to 2014 results. And so the updated report is the printed one you should have, and it's been corrected in the presentation. So today I'll be discussing just what we've learned from the results and how we intend to work toward our goals of becoming one Minneapolis, where disparities are eliminated so all Minneapolis residents can participate and prosper. So why we do the survey? We are, as you know, a city of incredible diversity, and we have this truly unique infrastructure with the neighborhood organizations that are across the city and provides an opportunity for, real thriving community engagement. And like any initiative of this scale, as hundreds of volunteers serving on neighborhood boards and committees, there are both stories of success, which you heard earlier for some of my colleagues about the great work that's being done, and then there's also areas for improvement. And so we're going to look at some of that today. As it notes here, neighborhood boards are responsible for decisions on how to allocate city funding, mainly through the community participation program is the funding we currently fund neighborhoods with, and they set neighborhood priorities. So it's important to us that neighborhoods ensure that the volunteers are reflective of the city demographics. Some of the key findings that we found from the result, 3 of the 7 diversity benchmarks, and these are similar to the appointed board and the commission's benchmarks, 3 of the 7 benchmarks were met. Between 2014 and 2016, there hasn't been a significant shift in demographics across the benchmarks. I'll break down some of those a little later. And we have work to do to increase representation in several areas. One thing you won't see in the report today, but is in the printed report, is the way that we broke down the survey responses by communities. And that gives a little bit more community level approach, which will make it so we can do a little bit more intentional engagement with neighborhood organizations on how to improve on these benchmarks relative to the communities that they're serving in. Just a little mention of the scope of the work. So our department has 5 neighborhood support specialists, the role that I'm in, and we serve and support 70 neighborhoods. These are all independent, nonprofit neighborhood organizations, and so we work with them. They have 770 board members, and so obviously we aren't having direct communication with those 770. We're doing support roles to those neighborhood organizations themselves. They serve the 400,000 residents in Minneapolis and receive about $3 million in annual funding from the Community Participation Program. Just to get started, the way we really tackled this year in the survey was trying to increase our response rate. We had 52% in 2014. This year, and this is thanks to the tireless work of my colleagues here, we went out in person to nearly 70 neighborhood organizations in the month of September, all those evening meetings. Many of you have probably attended, and we administered the surveys in person by paper and then followed up with online opportunity. And so we increased the response rate by 22% with a 74% response rate. We feel that gives us a bit of confidence in the results that we were able to get. So with the methodology, we use something similar to what the appointed boards and commissions does as far as the benchmark comparisons. We also use the Shannon Diversity Index in terms of age, income, and education. So the diversity measures are, again, similar to appointed boards and commissions. We tried to match up both the survey questions are identical, so that we had a more accurate comparison to appointed boards and commissions, and are going to hopefully be able to continue that so it's comparative to previous years as well. So we focus on these 7 benchmarks. The one thing I did want to note in gender, it's not on the next slide because we don't have census data to compare it to, but in 2016 we added transgender and then an open-ended option to be more inclusive and move away from gender binary language. So, this is just the dashboard again, similar to what my colleague Cheyenne shared earlier. We used 80% and above as sort of a green indicator that is on target. 40 to 79% needs attention, and then below 39% needs improvement. So this is our diversity measure dashboard. You'll see we met 3 of the 7 benchmarks of age, gender, and income. We used the Shannon Diversity Index on age, income, and education. And then you'll see the yellow indicators are disability, education, and people of color. And then the red indicator needs attention is in the owner-renter category. I'm going to break down a couple of those a little bit more in these next slides here. Renter owner, so that's just who rents and who owns and is serving on neighborhood boards. We have 15.1% of survey respondents reported that they are renters, compared to 51% of renters across the city. You will note on this slide it doesn't total 100%. That's because some board members are at-large members. They might be business owners or property owners, students, or workers in that area that serve a unique role on those boards. So the next slide is about race and ethnicity. Again, this is comparing persons of color to white alone serving on these boards. People of color make up 39% of the city's population, and they are 17% of survey participants. So that identifies a gap in representation on neighborhood boards that we're hoping to work to correct. Last one, similar to appointed boards and commissions, we don't have census data or ACS data to compare this to, but we did ask questions around sexual identity. You can see from the report we had 11.8% of respondents identified as GLBQ, 0.4% as asexual, and 87.9% as heterosexual. And then the last thing I'll note is just in terms of length of service. So this is the amount of time that people that responded to the survey have served on neighborhood boards. You'll note that 66% have served less than 3 years, and of that 26% have served less than 1 year. That gives some indication of kind of board turnover and the potential for shifts over time of representation on these neighborhood boards. The recommendations, so as I just want to really emphasize, NCR would like to see more equitable representation at neighborhood boards throughout the city, and this requires a partnership and collaboration with these 70 neighborhood organizations. It's not something our department can do alone, but there's a lot of work that we can do to support these neighborhoods and the potential board members that might serve on those boards. So some of our recommendations summarized here are working really specifically on building on and establishing trainings, focus groups, and ongoing support both to the neighborhoods themselves and to potential new and existing board members of those organizations in an effort to kind of close the gap on this board representation. I want to emphasize this isn't about meeting a benchmark or a quota, but it's really about asking difficult questions about who feels prioritized by the neighborhoods, who feels welcome and has an opportunity to serve in this capacity. So this is work that we'll be doing, and we'll be working with the neighborhoods to better close these gaps. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that report. It's interesting. I'm glad that we're measuring this. I'll just alert my colleagues that on the sheet of paper that I passed out, there's also a staff direction about this item. Before we get to that, are there any questions anybody has? Nothing too shocking in the results here? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I don't know how this would be accomplished, but it might be interesting to consider interviewing folks who've been involved in neighborhood organizations in the past or who have come to one meeting and never come back or otherwise maybe aren't participating. Mm-hmm. Anecdotally, I hear from a lot of people in my ward, which is of course very young, very high renter population, has a lot of folks who are underrepresented citywide, concentrated in one place. So I hear a lot of stories about I tried to go to a meeting and I don't ever want to go back. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not necessarily intentional, but anyway, just something to think about. The folks who are there, who we're talking to, are okay with how things are probably more than maybe people who aren't there.
Absolutely. Yeah, Chair Gordon and Councilmember Bender, just want to emphasize a couple of our recommendations that are right in line with that is for neighborhoods to share best practices. So to really talk about those kind of issues and how they can be, learn from one another to emphasize that. And then also we plan on doing some focus groups, both with board members who are part of those underrepresented groups to say, hey, what made you overcome some of those barriers to actually choose to serve on a board, as well as all the board members to get a better sense of, sort of what the value add is for them to participate in some of this work. So, yeah, great point.
I appreciate that too. And I noted before this started that this is the second time we've done this survey. And I think the second time we looked at the survey from our boards and commissions, we had made very little progress as well. We also, though, started something called the One Minneapolis Fund, where we were actually funding people to develop leadership in the community and bring in more diversity. And we've seen some shift in our own boards and commissions. So I think just tracking this information, getting the neighborhoods more aware of it. I also have to really appreciate that staff went to all the neighborhood organizations and helped them do the survey. So I think that was significant, and that not only in getting survey results, but for getting the boards to go, oh, the city must really care about this. Let's think about who we are and what we're doing. And I know many of them are, and they're working really hard. And so part of it isn't saying you're a bunch of failures. Never mind. I think what we want to say is, okay, let's see what we can do to help. And this idea partly came up from a discussion we had when we were talking about measuring the One Minneapolis Fund. We had a report maybe it was just one committee meeting ago. I know there were a lot of questions about what are the metrics, what are we actually getting for this? And then when I was getting briefed about this, I discussed this a little bit with the Director Rubidor. I think about, well, could we maybe use some One Minneapolis funds to target it better to help our neighborhood organizations? So I developed this staff direction, and I'm now going to read it for you. Directing neighborhood and community relations staff to work with the Neighborhood and Community Engagement Commission to recommend a way to dedicate at least a portion of future One Minneapolis funding to fund organizations that will work with and support neighborhood organizations to increase the number of potential neighborhood organization board members who are renters and people of color. My hope is with a kind of a targeted effort, a supportive effort, that we'll find some groups that are really excited about this and can help with this recruitment. Now, once they're recruited, they have to get elected to serve on the board, and once they serve and go to a few meetings, they have to want to stay on there. So it's a longer process, but this hopefully was a piece that will help with that. Are there any questions about that or comments? Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any amendments, but I just want to make sure and perhaps just ask the question is what specifically is going to be done by some of these organizations to ensure that the neighborhood boards and other commissions are increasing their membership for people of color? Because, I can see what I don't want to happen is a scenario where there's a whole lot of consultation and a bunch of meetings and then nothing really changes. I mean, I would prefer to just pay somebody to door knock. As an example.
Council Chair Gordon and Councilmember Frye. Within our recommendations, we do, and not only within our recommendations, but our role really is to work day to day with these neighborhood organizations to support them making progress on this effort. The city funding that we do provide is really specifically about community participation. It's a community participation program. It's about, and in those guidelines is about reaching out to underrepresented communities. So there is a bit of precedent to use the funding from the city to do that outreach and engagement necessary to close some of these gaps. And so, yeah. I mean, again, our role is, these are independent organizations, but our role really is to support them in making that progress.
So I'm not arguing that the intentions are good, and the conclusion we want to get to is valid and is necessary. My question is, how are we, I guess, as the city, how are we being specific so that the funds are being spent for outreach and engagement? I mean, at some points, people are going to have to do the grunt work, which is knocking on doors and, holding meetings in communities of color. to make sure that they understand what some of the, and I'm really specifically thinking about neighborhood associations right now, and I realize we're not limited to neighborhood associations in this endeavor. But, what specifically are we going to be asking them to do in this with the One Minneapolis Fund money?
So are you asking specifically related to the staff direction?
I am, yes. So maybe it's a better question for you, Mr. Chair.
Right. So
I apologize.
No, that's good.
First of all, the staff direction is asking for more specific recommendations to come back, but the staff direction is also more of the incentives or carrot approach. So it's not, and so I would say giving some support and some resources, saying we're going to dedicate some funds. We're already dedicating to One Minneapolis Fund to develop diverse leadership in the city for renters and people of color on neighborhood boards is a step to take. It's a step short of saying you're going to lose city funding somehow if you don't diversify your board. I mean, it's not the stick approach, and so it's not necessarily a guarantee. I'll admit that. What this is saying is we're going to put some resources into this and see if we can't move the dial by doing that. So I think it's a different discussion if we were going to.
And my question.
There's no guarantee.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I understand that. And I know you can never guarantee it, but if there's a little bit more specificity that's attached to either the staff direction or their plan when they come back, I would be much more amenable to supporting.
I think there'll have to be specificity, and my intention would be there'd be a request for proposal then that would be drafted for the future funding of the One Minneapolis Fund, and in that request for proposal, there'll be goals that are specifically mentioned that will include recruitment of renters and people of color to serve on neighborhood boards, or maybe recruitment's the wrong word. So there will be more specificity in terms of what are the contracts that are going to go out. There already has been more specificity in One Minneapolis funding. Maybe Mr. Rubidor or somebody wants to weigh in on that.
Chair Gordon and council members, if I could try to answer your question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
One, I think we can come back with a lot more specifics around this per the staff direction. So what I would ask is that you would give us a little bit of time to work with the NCEC. The first thing that comes to mind when this notion was brought to me was very early in the process of One Minneapolis. White House received a grant from us, and one of the things that they did, which to Councilmember Bender's point, is they met with a number of people that were from the Latino community, specifically around neighborhood organizations. Just what do they think they are? What is their knowledge of them? Have they had any experience with them? In order to collect just data, basically, to understand what it takes for that particular community to engage with neighborhood groups. And we got that report back from White House, and actually they presented to the NCEC. But I think what we could do with the One Minneapolis Fund, if I understand Chair Gordon's intent, is really have some funds dedicated to have a specific report back that leads to changes into the program that lead to those results. What I really like about the notion is this is a community-based approach that we use community partners in order to do this, because this is all about relationship building. So using the core of the One Minneapolis program is around using partnerships with people in the community that are already doing this work, but really making sure that that focuses. So long story short is, if I understand the staff direction correctly, we can come back in probably a couple months to give you an idea of what those specifics would be. The One Minneapolis Fund, the next round of funding, the NCEC will be taking up those guidelines in January and February with revisions to those, which would then, this could be included in that and then incorporated for the 2017 grant fund. So,
okay, and so how does this staff direction change the route we're already on with respect to the One Minneapolis Fund? I mean, the One Minneapolis Fund already has goals to increase participation in communities of color in these organizations and entities.
Well, from my thinking is this says we're going to carve out a piece of that funding and focus it like a laser in on recruiting and getting people of color and renters on neighborhood organizations. So right now, I think the goals are more general. It's diversifying our boards, commissions, and our neighborhood organizations, and they look at that. So that's my intention is we put some real focused effort in.
Chair Gordon, if I may also just add to that, by being real specific about that we're looking for outcomes around neighborhood organizations, it will also then make clear to the applicants. It will attract applicants that are working in that particular area as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes One Minneapolis funds. They haven't talked to neighborhood organizations at all necessarily. They went out and did great work and did trainings and outreach, but this works.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing no questions, I will move the staff direction. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And then I will move to receive and file the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey Report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Here's two. And now we're up to our last item, and I think that Mr. Milburn gets the award. I think he showed up early for the committee meeting, and he was the last item. So this is on our community solar garden subscription agreement. We went out for an RFP, and I believe we got response. And I just want to congratulate you on making it through the meeting so far, sir. Hope it's been interesting.
Council Chair
Welcome.
Gordon and council member, committee members. My name is Brian Milberg. I'm the energy manager for the city of Minneapolis. I'm here to report on our community solar garden where we went out with a city-sponsored RFP. But before I do that, I'd like to say today is a very special day. I hope you noticed it was a little bit brighter when you came in here today. I think it's appropriate that this committee is the first meeting in our newly lit council chamber. These are all LED lights. We have 50% more light for the cameras with less energy than we had before. And we are at this date now embarking on replacing all of our fluorescent lighting in the city with LEDs. We just started our project. I wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Back to our community solar gardens. So basically, we were here once before. We did a very large community solar garden project in a consortium with Metropolitan Council. This was an action that came out of that effort where we went out with an RFP, which I'll discuss in a moment. But we're going to just do a real quick review on how the gardens work, the proposals that we received, the financial structures, and we're going to make a recommendation to the committee. I do want to say that we did something here that no one else has done in the state of Minnesota. There are over 900 gardens that have already applied to Excel Energy, and not a single one of them has tried to do what we tried to do in this RFP. So it was definitely worth doing. Just to reiterate how the gardens work, on the left-hand side of the triangle, you see the solar garden in the lower left-hand corner. They basically provide solar electricity to Excel Energy for free. Excel Energy sells all of our electricity to us as a customer, just like they always have, and they bill us exactly as they always have. Except that for the amount that we subscribe from the garden, we get a credit, which is noted by that green arrow of cash coming back to the city as a credit on every kilowatt hour we subscribe to. And in addition, we pay the garden operator on the bottom in the red arrow, we pay them for the electricity. What we'll be discussing here today is the price for that electricity that we pay to the garden. So typically, if this was an example monthly bill at one of our water treatment buildings, over $18,000 of regular electricity, we would get a credit of we would get a credit based on the $14,000 after the subscription payments, and we would make this extra $4,000 subscription payment. The net result is we save about $700 or almost 4% on our electricity bill. So in our proposal, we asked for gardens up to 1 megawatt in size, which is what the law is the maximum that's allowed. And the difference that we did in our RFP is we asked for the renewable energy credits to be accruing to the city. All of the other 900 applications have the renewable energy credits going to Excel Energy, which they then use to meet their renewable portfolio standards. In our garden, the RECs would stay with the city, and Excel Energy would have to then find other ways to meet their portfolio standards. We also asked for a price with the RECs going to Excel, as most other gardens, to try and see what the market was saying, what that price differential would be. And in a change from the last set of RFPs we engaged in this one we specifically called out the typical city construction civil rights goals of women and minority business enterprises in the RFP. We received 2 responses, one from SunEdison and the other from Solar Power and Light. These are both national organizations, but both of them would use local workforce to build the array and to manage them. A little color here just so you can, when we get to a future graph, you can see how it works. But SunEdison gave us 2 proposals. Both, in their case, both proposals showed the RECs going to Xcel Energy. One proposal was they would just give us a discount from this credit that we would get each year. The credit is going to change each year with a PUC filing. And so basically, there's no risk in this type of a contract. If the credit is 12 cents a kilowatt hour, they're going to charge us 0.75 cents less than that, so we will make a little bit of money each month. The other option is to go with a standard price of $11.95, which right now is slightly above the credit, but it would increase at 1.5% per year in terms of our subscription price. But the credit from Xcel is expected to go up at least 2.5% a year. So over time, we would actually start making money. And if rates increase as they have over the last 10 to 15 years, we actually could accrue between $100,000 and $300,000 in net profit, net present value with that type of a contract. The other company was Solar Power and Light. And they did provide a price with both RECs going to the city or to Xcel. Now, their pricing was much higher, and it's significantly higher than anything we received in this RFP as well as in the previous set of RFPs. And basically, no matter how I ran the numbers, their price goes up at 2.5% a year, and it's already 2 to 3 cents higher than what we're paying for electricity. So there's really no way to make this contract financially viable. If we chose to do it, we would, over time, lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over the 25-year period of the contract. So as I said before, how much we could save or might lose really depends on how fast electricity rates increase. And this just shows a chart from various estimates. The Department of Commerce uses 2.65. I went and did an analysis of our larger accounts, and over 8 years, they went up 3.7%. However, just in the last 2 years, they've gone up 7.5%. So it's hard to predict the future. This slide is a little busy, and that's because the first set of bars on that legend are all of the arrays that we subscribed to in the previous RFP. And you'll see that over 25 years, they're all positive. If you look now at the last 4 items, the dark blue is the SunEdison with the accelerator, and it's about $110,000 in net present value. The no risk option shows a net present value of about $78,000. But then the Solar Power and Light, that's the light blue and the gray, you'll see that they're significantly negative, and they never turn in the positive direction. Now, this is with the Department of Commerce's 2.65% escalator in electricity rates. There is, of course, unfortunately, the possibility that electricity rates might not go up as much in the future. And if that is true, you can see that, again, the no-risk option, which is the darker blue, stays positive. But because of the escalators in the subscription price, the others do turn negative over time, and of course the Solar Power and Light is significantly negative. There is the possibility that rates will go up even higher, and here I show again the SunEdison numbers are always positive, and even at this large increase of 3.7%, the Solar Power and Light still stays negative. Now, just to see if you're awake, We'll have a nice colored chart. And this basically just matches up with what was on the graph. It just shows you numbers. And what I'm showing here is that if the council wishes to take no risk at all, then we should go with the very first bar on the chart, Sun Edison with the fixed discount. It's a known savings every year of around $4,000. If we want to bet on electricity rates continuing at their current clip, then I would go with the escalator, where we could save between $100,000 and $300,000. And as you can see in this chart, all the solar and power light, no matter what types of assumptions we use, they're all negative. So the Property Services Department and Finance are proposing that we do not go with a solar power and light contract, but that we do contract with Sun Edison at whichever of those two rates you so decide.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Councilmember Glidden.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe you had some thoughts you're going to share with us. I just thought it was kind of interesting. You present the two scenarios, but didn't give us a staff recommendation on one versus the other. And so that's where I think kind of, there doesn't seem like there's tremendous risk, but there is some risk. And so, just having some input from you as someone who has been following kind of what might be in the future, as much as you're able to give us your thoughts from kind of, again, a city perspective of what might be our best choice here.
Go ahead. I think you were trying to, I think your recommendation is to go with the no-risk option, but it's a little unclear.
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Glidden, other members of the committee. Personally, the 1.5% escalator falls directly in the middle of the previous contracts we approved. I don't see anything that's changed in the meantime. Mm-hmm. I personally, if it was my personal choice, I would go with the escalator.
Mm-hmm. Because of the length of the contract.
Because of the length of the contract.
So is that what's recommended on the RCA?
Pardon?
That's what you're recommending on the RCA?
Well, we left it up to the committee.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. That's why I wanted to make sure
I left it up to you.
Getting all the benefit though of your insight, and then we get some choice here. Okay.
Okay. So that wasn't necessarily clear. You have an opinion?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say if Mr. Milberg feels comfortable that the 1.5 percent option is risk that is not significant risk to the city, then especially due to the length of the contract and how that lined up with other options that were kind of already before us, I think that seems like a reasonable way to go. So I would go ahead and make that motion if that helps move us forward with discussion.
Excellent. Are there any questions or comments on the motion now that we've figured out which one you were recommending? Or maybe you weren't really recommending either, I understand.
Well, Chair Gordon and committee, I would like to add one last item that I forgot to mention. If we accept this contract with all of the arrays that we have of our own, as well as the subscriptions that we've agreed to implement over 2017 previously, we'll have almost 10% of our electricity will somehow be tied to renewable energy, totally separate from a portfolio standard at Xcel. So I just wanted to mention that.
I don't see any discussion on your motion beyond that either. So why don't we vote on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And I do have one quick staff direction because we've talked about going out for a third RFP. Mm-hmm. Remember, we've had this discussion before. Essentially, this is a request for proposals to go out for another solar garden where we could make subscriptions available to people of low or moderate incomes. And this is where there be different ways to do it. We're going to see what possible providers, what input they would give. And this would be also prioritize having something that's available to Minneapolis residents, hopefully located in the city of Minneapolis. And I think the big piece is now that the PUC's kind of weighed in on the low and moderate income piece and the utilities have, now let's go out for an RFP and see what we could actually get. So I didn't read the staff direction and I passed out all my copies, but I think shall I read it? Okay. Directing Finance and Property Services staff to report back to the HEC committee by March 31st with a community solar request for proposals incorporating the following criteria for evaluation. Availability of subscriptions for Minneapolis residents and businesses. Service by at least a certain minimum percentage of the overall community solar garden to low and moderate income customers and potentially incentives for low and moderate income customers, with the City of Minneapolis acting as the backup subscriber to facilitate service to these customers. The third bullet point, location within the City of Minneapolis, potentially on a city-owned site. And the fourth, potential ownership of the garden by Minneapolis residents, businesses, and property owners. Seeing no questions on that, all those in favor of that staff direction, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And I think that concludes our business today. Yes. Okay, one more item.
I guess with the quick transition from our department presentations, there was the side-by-side comparison. I don't want to break protocol. If it's possible that I could present that for a quick minute of your time, council members and staff. If that's breaking protocol, I'll just say happy holidays and all the best.
How about you share, so it's just one slide?
It's two.
It's two pictures. Would committee members prefer to get that over email, or can we take 2 minutes?
Whichever you prefer.
It's a mixed bag. Oh, he's got, there was a piece of the presentation that got missed. We were going to look at the two diversity surveys and compare them. He's got 2 slides. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, email's great, is what you said? Your mic.
Great. Email's fantastic.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So that's fine. So happy holidays and goodwill to you all and your families as well. I'm ready. That's fine.